Eight Cousins by Louisa May Alcott. Read by Bonnie Erickson. Chapter 1. Two Girls. Rose sat all alone in the big best parlor, with her little handkerchief laid ready to catch the first tear, for she was thinking of her troubles, and a shower was expected. She had retired to this room as a good place in which to be miserable, for it was dark and still, full of ancient furniture, sombre curtains, and hung all round with portraits of solemn old gentlemen in wigs, severe-nosed ladies in top-heavy caps, and staring children in little bob-tailed coats or short-waisted frocks. It was an excellent place for woe, and the fitful spring rain that pattered on the window-pane seemed to sob, "Cry away, I'm with you." Rose really did have some cause to be sad, for she had no mother, and had lately lost her father also, which left her no home but this with her great aunts. She had been with them only a week, and though the dear old ladies had tried their best to make her happy, they had not succeeded very well, for she was unlike any child they had ever seen, and they felt very much as if they had the care of a low-spirited butterfly. They had given her the freedom of the house, and for a day or two she had amused herself roaming all over it, for it was a capital old mansion, and was full of all manner of odd nooks, charming rooms, and mysterious passages. Windows broke out in unexpected places, like little balconies overhung the garden most romantically, and there was a long upper hall full of curiosities from all parts of the world, for the Campbells had been sea captains for generations. Aunt Plenty had even allowed Rose to rummage in her great china closet, a spicy retreat, rich in all the goodies that children love. But Rose seemed to care little for these toothsome temptations, and when that hope failed, Aunt Plenty gave up in despair. Gentle Aunt Peace had tried all sorts of pretty needlework, and planned a doll's wardrobe that would have won the heart of even an older child. But Rose took little interest in pink satin hats and tiny hose, though she sewed dutifully till her aunt caught her wiping tears away with the train of a wedding dress, and that discovery put an end to the sewing society. Then both old ladies put their heads together and picked out the model child of the neighborhood to come and play with their niece. But Annabel Bliss was the worst failure of all, for Rose could not bear the sight of her, and said she was so like a wax doll she longed to give her a pinch and see if she would squeak. So prim little Annabel was sent home, and the exhausted aunties left Rose to her own devices for a day or two. Bad weather and a cold kept her indoors, and she spent most of her time in the library, where her father's books were stored. Here she read a great deal, cried a little, and dreamed many of the innocent bright dreams in which imaginative children find such comfort and delight. This suited her better than anything else, but it was not good for her, and she grew pale, heavy-eyed, and listless, though Aunt Plenty gave her iron enough to make a cooking stove, and Aunt Peace petted her like a poodle. Seeing this, the poor aunties racked their brains for a new amusement, and determined to venture a bold stroke, though not very hopeful of its success. They said nothing to Rose about their plan for this Saturday afternoon, but let her alone till the time came for the grand surprise, little dreaming that the odd child would find pleasure for herself in a most unexpected quarter. Before she had time to squeeze out a single tear, a sound broke the stillness, making her prick up her ears. It was the only soft twitter of a bird, but it seemed to be peculiarly gifted bird, for while she listened the soft twitter changed to a lively whistle, then a trill, a coo, a chirp, and ended in a musical mixture of all the notes, as if the bird burst out laughing. Rose laughed also, and forgetting her woes, jumped up, saying eagerly, "It is a mockingbird! Where is it?" Running down the long hall, she peeped out at both doors, but saw nothing feathered except a draggled-tailed chicken under a burdock leaf. She listened again, and the sound seemed to be in the house. Away she went, much excited by the chase, and following the changeful song, it led her to the china closet door. "In there! How funny!" she said. But when she entered, not a bird appeared except the everlastingly kissing swallows on the Canton china that lined the shelves. All of a sudden Rose's face brightened, and softly opening the slide, she peered into the kitchen. But the music had stopped, and all she saw was a girl in a blue apron scrubbing the hearth. Rose stared about her for a minute, and then asked abruptly, "Did you hear that mockingbird?" "I should call it a Phoebe bird," answered the girl, looking up with a twinkle in her black eyes. "Where did it go?" "It is here still." "Where?" "In my throat. Do you want to hear it?" "Oh, yes, I'll come in." And Rose crept through the slide to the wine shelf on the other side, being too hurried and puzzled to go round by the door. The girl wiped her hands, crossed her feet on the little island of carpet where she was stranded in a sea of soap suds, and then, sure enough, out of her slender throat came the swallow's twitter, the robin's whistle, the blue jay's call, the thrush's song, the wood dove's coo, and many other familiar note, all ending as before with the musical ecstasy of a bobolink singing and swinging among the meadow grass on a bright June day. Rose was so astonished that she nearly fell off her perch, and when the little concert was over, clapped her hands delightedly. "Oh, it was lovely! Who taught you?" "The birds," answered the girl with a smile, as she fell to work again. "It is wonderful! I can sing, but nothing half so fine as that. What is your name, please?" "Phoebe Moore." "I've heard of Phoebe birds, but I don't believe the real ones could do that," laughed Rose, adding as she watched with interest the scattering of dabs of soft soap over the bricks, "May I stay and see you work? It is very lonely in the parlor." "Yes, indeed, if you want to," answered Phoebe, wringing out her cloth in a capable sort of way that impressed Rose very much. "It must be fun to swath the water around and dig out the soap. I'd love to do it, only Aunt wouldn't like it, I suppose," said Rose, quite taken with the new employment. "You'd soon get tired, so you'd better keep tidy and look on." I suppose you help your mother a good deal." "I haven't got any folks." "Why, where do you live, then?" "I'm going to live here, I hope. Debbie wants someone to help round, and I've come to try for a week." "I hope you will stay, for it is very dull," said Rose, who had taken a sudden fancy to this girl, who sung like a bird and worked like a woman. "Hope I shall, for I'm 15 now, and old enough to earn my own living. You have come to stay a spell, haven't you?" asked Phoebe, looking up at her guest and wondering how life could be dull to a girl who wore a silk frock, a daintily frilled apron, a pretty locket, and had her hair tied up with a velvet snood. "Yes, I shall stay till my uncle comes. He is my guardian now, and I don't know what he will do with me. Have you a guardian?" "My sakes, no! I was left on the poorhouse steps, a little mite of a baby, and Miss Rogers took a liking to me, so I've been there ever since. But she is dead now, and I take care of myself." "How interesting! It is like Arabella Montgomery and the Gypsy's Child. Did you ever read that sweet story?" asked Rose, who was fond of tales of foundlings and had read many. "I don't have any books to read, and all the spare time I get I run off to the woods. That rests me better than stories," answered Phoebe as she finished one job and began on another. Rose watched her as she got out a great pan of beans to look over, and wondered how it would seem to have life all work and no play. Presently Phoebe seemed to think it was her turn to ask a question, and said, wistfully, "You've lots of schooling, I suppose." "Oh, dear me, yes. I've been at a boarding school nearly a year, and I'm almost dead with lessons. The more I got, the more Miss Power gave me, and I was so miserable I most cried my eyes out. Papa never gave me hard things to do, and he always taught me so pleasantly I loved to study. Oh, we were so happy, and so fond of one another, but now he is gone, and I am left all alone." The tear that would not come when Rose sat waiting for it came now of its own accord, 2 of them in fact, and rolled down her cheeks, telling the tale of love and sorrow better than any words could do it. For a minute there was no sound in the kitchen but the little daughter's sobbing and the sympathetic patter of rain. Phoebe stopped rattling her beans from one pan to the other, and her eyes were full of pity rested on the curly hair as they rested on the curly head bent down on Rose's knee, for she saw that the heart under the pretty locket ached with its loss, and the dainty apron was used to dry sadder tears than any she had ever shed. Somehow she felt more contented with her brown calico gown and blue checked pinafore. Envy changed to compassion, and if she had dared she would have gone and hugged her afflicted guest. Fearing that might not be considered proper, she said in her cheery voice, "I'm sure you ain't all alone with such a lot of folks belonging to you, and all so rich and clever. You'll be petted to pieces, Debbie says, because you are the only girl in the family." Phoebe's last words made Rose smile in spite of her tears, and she looked out from behind her apron with an April face, saying in a tone of comic distress, "That's one of my troubles. I've got 6 aunts, and they all want me, and I don't know any of them very well. Papa named this place the Ant Hill, and now I see why." Phoebe laughed with her as she said encouragingly, "Everyone calls it so, and it's a real good name, for all the Mrs. Campbells live handy by, and keep coming up to see the old ladies. I could stand the aunts, but there are dozens of cousins, dreadful boys, all of them, and I detest boys. Some of them came to see me last Wednesday, but I was lying down, and when Auntie came to call me, I went under the quilt and pretended to be asleep. I shall have to see them sometime, but I dread it so." And Rose gave a shudder, for, having lived alone with her invalid father, she knew nothing of boys, and considered them a species of wild animal. "Oh, I guess you'll like 'em. I've seen 'em flying round when they come over from the Point, sometimes in their boats, and sometimes on horseback. If you like boats and horses, you'll enjoy yourself first rate." "But I don't. I'm afraid of horses, and boats make me ill, and I hate boys." And poor Rose wrung her hands at the awful prospect before her. One of these horrors alone she could have borne, but all together were too much for her, and she began to think of a speedy return to the detested school. Phoebe laughed at her woe till the beans danced in the pan, but tried to comfort her by suggesting a means of relief. "Perhaps your uncle will take you away where there ain't any boys. Debbie says he's a real kind man, and always brings heaps of nice things when he comes." "Yes, but you see that is another trouble, for I don't know Uncle Alec at all. He hardly ever came to see us, though he sent me pretty things very often. Now I belong to him, and shall have to mind him till I'm 18. I may not like him a bit, and I fret about it all the time." "Well, I wouldn't borrow trouble, but have a real good time. I'm sure I should think I was in clover if I had folks and money and nothing to do but enjoy myself," began Phoebe, but got no further, for a sudden rush and rumble outside made them both jump. "It's thunder!" said Phoebe. "It's a circus!" cried Rose from her elevated perch, and caught glimpses of a gay cart of some sort and several ponies with flying manes and tails. The sound died away, and the girls went about to continue their confidences, when old Debbie appeared, looking rather cross and sleepy after her nap. "You are wanted in the parlor, Miss Rose. Has anybody come?" "Little girls shouldn't ask questions, but do as they are bid," was all Debbie would answer. "I do hope it isn't Aunt Myra. She always scares me out of my wits, asking how my cough is, and groaning over me as if I was going to die," said Rose, preparing to retire the way she came, for the slide being cut for the admission of bouncing Christmas turkeys and puddings was plenty large enough for a slender girl. "Guess you'll wish it was, Aunt Myra, when you see who has come. Don't never let me catch you coming into my kitchen that way again, or I'll shut you up in the big byler," growled Debbie, who thought it was her duty to snub children on all occasions. Eight Cousins by Louisa May Alcott. Read by Bonnie Erickson. Chapter 2. The Clan. Rose scrambled into the china closet as rapidly as possible, and there refreshed herself by making faces at Debbie, while she settled her plumage and screwed up her courage. Then she crept softly down the hall and peeped into the parlor. No one appeared, and all was so still she felt sure the company was upstairs. So she skipped boldly through the half-open folding doors to behold, on the other side, a sight that nearly took her breath away. 7 boys stood in a row, all ages, all sizes, all yellow-haired and blue-eyed, all in full Scotch costume, and smiling, nodding, and saying with one voice, "How are you, cousin?" Rose gave a little gasp, and looked wildly about her as if ready to fly, for fear magnified the 7, and the room seemed full of boys. Before she could run, however, the tallest lad stepped out of line, saying pleasantly, "Don't be frightened. This is the clan come to welcome you, and I'm the chief, Archie, at your service." He held out his hand as he spoke, and Rose timidly put her own into a brown paw, which closed over the white morsel, and held it as the chief continued his introductions. "We come in full rig, for we always turn out in style on grand occasions. Hope you like it. Now I'll tell you who these chaps are, and then we shall be all right. This big one is Prince Charlie, Aunt Clara's boy. She has but one, so he is an extra good one. This old fellow is Mac, the bookworm, called Worm for short. This sweet creature is Steve the dandy. Look at his gloves and topknot, if you please. They are Aunt Jane's lads, and a precious pair, you'd better believe. These are the brats, my brothers Geordie and Will, and Jamie the baby. Now, my men, step out and show your manners." At this command, to Rose's great dismay, 6 more hands were offered, and it was evident that she was expected to shake them all. It was a trying moment to the bashful child, but remembering that they were her kinsmen come to welcome her, she tried her best to return the greeting cordially. This impressive ceremony being over, the clan broke ranks, and both rooms instantly appeared to be pervaded with boys. Rose hastily retired to the shelter of a big chair and sat there watching the invaders, and wondering when her aunt would come and rescue her. As if bound to do their duty manfully, yet rather oppressed by it, each lad paused beside her chair in his wanderings, made a brief remark, received a still briefer answer, and then sheered off with a relieved expression. Archie came first, and leaning over the chair back, observed in a paternal tone, "I'm glad you've come, cousin, and I hope you'll find the ant-hill pretty jolly." "I think I shall." Mac shook his hair out of his eyes, stumbled over a stool, and asked abruptly, "Did you bring any books with you?" "4 boxes full. They are in the library." Mac vanished from the room, and Steve, striking an attitude which displayed his costume effectively, said with an affable smile, "We were sorry not to see you last Wednesday. I hope your cold is better." "Yes, thank you," and a smile began to dimple about Rose's mouth as she remembered her retreat under the bed cover. Feeling that he had been received with distinguished marks of attention, Steve strolled away with his top knot higher than ever, and Prince Charlie pranced across the room, saying, in a free and easy tone, "Mamma sent her love, and hopes you will be well enough to come over for a day next week. It must be desperately dull here for a little thing like you." "I'm 13 and a half, though I do look small," cried Rose, forgetting her shyness in indignation at this insult to her newly acquired teens. "Beg pardon, ma'am. Never should have guessed it." And Charlie went off with a laugh, glad to have struck a spark out of his meek cousin. Geordie and Will came together, 2 sturdy 11 and 12-year-olders, and fixing their round blue eyes on Rose, fired off a question apiece, as if it were a shooting match, and she the target. "Did you bring your monkey?" "No, he is dead." "Are you going to have a boat?" "I hope not." Here the 2, with a right-about face movement, abruptly marched away, and little Jamie demanded with childish frankness, Did you bring me anything nice?" "Yes, lots of candy," answered Rose, whereupon Jamie ascended into her lap with a sounding kiss and the announcement that he liked her very much. This proceeding rather startled Rose, for the other lads looked and laughed, and in her confusion she said hastily to the younger usurper, "Did you see the circus go by?" "When? Where?" cried all the boys in great excitement at once. "Just before you came. At least I thought it was a circus, for I saw a red and black sort of cart, and ever so many little ponies, and—" She got no further, for a general shout made her pause suddenly, as Archie explained the joke by saying in the middle of his laugh, "It was our new dog cart, and the Shetland ponies. You'll never hear the last of your circus, cousin." "But there were so many, and they went so fast, and the cart was so very red," began Rose, trying to explain her mistake. "Come and see them all," cried the prince, and before she knew what was happening she was borne away to the barn and tumultuously introduced to 3 shaggy ponies and the gay new dog-cart. She had never visited these regions before, and had her doubts as to the propriety of her being there now, but when she suggested that Auntie might not like it, there was a general cry of, "She told us to amuse you, and we can do it ever so much better out here than poking around in the house." "I'm afraid I shall get cold without my sack," began Rose, who wanted to stay, but felt rather out of her element. "No, you won't. We'll fix you," cried the lads, as one clapped his cap on her head, another tied a rough jacket round her neck by the sleeves, a third nearly smothered her in a carriage blanket, and a fourth threw open the door of the old barouche that stood there, saying with a flourish, "Step in, ma'am, and make yourself comfortable, while we show you some fun." So Rose sat in state, enjoying herself very much, for the lads proceeded to dance a Highland fling, with a spirit and skill that made her clap her hands and laugh as she had not done for weeks. "How is that, my lassie?" asked the prince, coming up all flushed and breathless when the ballet was over. "It was splendid. I never went to the theatre but once, and the dancing was not half so pretty as this. What clever boys you must be," said Rose, smiling upon her kinsmen like a little queen upon her subjects. "Ah, we're a fine lot, and that is only the beginning of our larks. We haven't got the pipes here, or we'd sing for you and play for you a dolce medley," answered Charlie, looking much elated at her praise. "I did not know we were Scotch. Papa never said anything about it, or seemed to care about Scotland, except to have me sing the old ballads," said Rose, beginning to feel as if she had left America behind her somewhere. "Neither did we, till lately. We've been reading Scott's novels, and all of a sudden we remembered that our grandfather was a Scotchman. So we hunted up the old stories, got a bagpipe, put on our plaids, and went in, heart and soul, for the glory of the clan. We've been at it for some time now, and it's great fun. Our people like it, and I think we are pretty canny set." Archie said this from the other coach step where he had perched while the rest climbed up before and behind to join in the chat as they rested. "I'm Fitzjames, and he's Roderick Dhu, and we'll give you the broadsword combat some day. It's a great thing, you'd better believe," added the prince. "Yes, and you should hear Steve play the pipes. He makes 'em squirrel like a good one," cried Will from the box, eager to air the accomplishments of his race. "Mac's the fellow to hunt up the old stories and tell us how to dress right, and pick out rousing bits for us to speak and sing," put in Geordie, saying a good word for the absent worm. "And what do you and Will do?" asked Rose of Jamie, who sat beside her, as if bound to keep her in sight till the promised gift had been handed over. "Oh, I'm the little foot-page and do errands, and Will and Geordie are the troops when we march, and the stags when we hunt, and the traitors when we want to cut any heads off." "They are very obliging, I'm sure," said Rose, whereat the utility men beamed with modest pride, and resolved to enact Wallace and Montrose as soon as possible for their cousin's special benefit. "Let's have a game of tag," cried the prince, swinging himself up to a beam with a sounding slap on Stevie's shoulder. Regardless of his gloves, Dandy tore after him, and the rest swarmed in every direction as if bent on breaking their necks and dislocating their joints as rapidly as possible. It was a new and astonishing spectacle to Rose, fresh from a prim boarding school, and she watched the active lads with breathless interest, thinking their antics far superior to those of Mops, the dear departed monkey. Will had just covered himself with glory by pitching off a high loft head first and coming up all right when Phoebe appeared with a cloak, hood, and rubbers, also a message from Aunt Plenty that Miss Rose wants to come in directly. "All right, we'll bring her," answered Archie, issuing some mysterious order which was so promptly obeyed that before Rose could get out of the carriage the boys had caught hold of the pole and rattled her out of the barn, round the oval and up the front door with a cheer that brought two caps to an upper window and caused Debbie to cry aloud from the back porch, "Them harum-scarum boys will certainly be the death of that delicate little critter." But the delicate little critter seemed the better for her trip, and ran up the steps, looking rosy, gay, and dishevelled, to be received with lamentations by Aunt Plenty, who begged her to go and lie down at once. "Oh, please don't! We have come to tea with our cousin, and we'll be as good as gold if you'll let us stay, Auntie," clamoured the boys, who had not only approved of our cousin, but had no mind to lose their tea, for Aunt Plenty's name but feebly expressed her bountiful nature. "Well, dears, you can. Only be quiet and let Rose go and take her iron and be made tidy, and then we will see what we can find for supper," said the old lady as she trotted away, followed by a volley of directions for the approaching feast. "Marmalade for me, Auntie. Plenty of plum cake, please. Tell Debbie to trot out the baked pears. I'm your man for lemon pie, ma'am. Do have fritters, Rose. Oh, do have fritters. Rose will like 'em. She'd rather have tarts, I know." When Rose came down 15 minutes later, with every curl smooth and her most beruffled apron on, she found the boys loafing about the long hall and paused on the halfway landing to take an observation, for till now she had not really examined her new-found cousins. There was a strong family resemblance among them, though some of the yellow heads were darker than others, some of the cheeks brown instead of rosy, and the ages varied all the way from 16-year-old Archie to Jamie, who was 10 years younger. None of them were especially comely but the prince, yet all were hearty, happy-looking lads, and Rose decided that boys were not as dreadful as she had expected to find them. They were all so characteristically employed that she could not help smiling as she looked. Archie and Charlie, evidently great cronies, were pacing up and down, shoulder to shoulder, whistling Bonnie Dundee. Mac was reading in a corner with his book close to his nearsighted eyes. Dandy was arranging his hair before the oval glass in the hat stand. Geordie and Will investigating the internal economy of the moon-faced clock, and Jamie lay kicking his heels on the mat at the foot of the stairs, bent on demanding his sweeties the instant Rose appeared. She guessed his intention, and forestalled his demand by dropping a handful of sugar plums down upon him. At his cry of rapture the other lads looked up, smiled involuntarily, for the little kinswoman standing there above was a winsome sight, with her shy, soft eyes, bright hair, and laughing face. The black frock reminded them of her loss, and filled the boyish hearts with a kindly desire to be good to our cousin, who had no longer any home but this. "There she is, fine as you please," cried Steve, kissing his hand to her. "Come on, missy, tea is ready," added the prince, encouragingly. I shall take her in," and Archie offered his arm with great dignity and honor that made Rose turn as red as a cherry and long to run upstairs again. It was a merry supper, and the two elder boys added much to the fun by tormenting the rest with dark hints of some interesting event which was about to occur. Something uncommonly fine, they declared it was, but enveloped in the deepest mystery for the present. "Did I ever see it?" asked Jamie. "Not to remember it, but Mac and Steve have, and liked it immensely," answered Archie, thereby causing the two mentioned to neglect Debbie's delectable fritters for several minutes while they cudgelled their brains. "Who will have it first?" asked Will, with his mouth full of marmalade. "Aunt Plenty, I guess." "When will she have it?" demanded Geordie, bouncing in his seat with impatience. "Some time on Monday." "Heart alive! What is the boy talking about?" cried the old lady from behind the tall urn, which left little to be seen but the topmost bow of her cap. "Doesn't auntie know?" asked a chorus of voices. "No, and that's the best of the joke, for she is desperately fond of it." "What colour is it?" asked Rose, joining in the fun. "Blue and brown." "Is it good to eat?" asked Jamie. "Some people think so, but I shouldn't like to try it," answered Charlie, laughing so he spilt his tea. "Who does it belong to?" put in Steve. Archie and the prince stared at one another rather blankly for a minute. Then Archie answered with a twinkle of the eye that made Charlie explode again. "To Grandfather Campbell." This was a poser, and they gave up the puzzle, though Jamie confided to Rose that he did not think he could live till Monday without knowing what this remarkable thing was. Soon after tea, the clan departed singing "All the Blue Bonnets Are Over the Border" at the tops of their voices. "Well, dear, how do you like your cousins?" asked Aunt Plenty, as the last pony frisked round the corner and the din died away. "Pretty well, ma'am, but I like Phoebe better," an answer which caused Aunt Plenty to hold up her hands in despair and trot away to tell her sister Peace that she should never understand that child, and it was a mercy Alec was coming soon to take the responsibility off their hands. Fatigued by the unusual exertions of the afternoon, Rose curled herself up in the sofa corner to rest and think about the great mystery, little guessing that she was to know it first of all. Right in the middle of her meditations she fell asleep and dreamed she was at home again in her own little bed. She seemed to wake and see her father bending over her, to hear him say, "My little Rose," to answer, "Yes, Papa," and then to feel him take her in his arms and kiss her tenderly. So sweet, so real was the dream, that she started up with a cry of joy to find herself in the arms of a brown, bearded man, who held her close and whispered in a voice so like her father's that she clung to him involuntarily. "This is my little girl, and I am Uncle Alec."